Hi, everybody. My name's Tom Brada, and on behalf of myself and the entire contend, we appreciate you joining us this afternoon for our panel discussion on the true costs of coal mining. Today, our esteemed panel will help us understand the challenges facing coal communities, share some insights into how communities like mine can navigate a changing energy economy. Also, I don't know if you've heard, we've had some adjustments on the panel. We were scheduled for this morning and we had a auto accident that held us up a little bit, but we made it this afternoon, and then we lost one panel member early. Oh, I'm sorry, one panel member earlier. So if it seems like we're going to wing it a little bit, we're winging it a little bit. So hold on. All right. So I live about an hour north of Billings in the Bow Mountains. Since 2009, Signal Peak Energy has operated Montana's only underground coal mine, doing long wall mining techniques right down the road from my home. Certainly, coal mining comes with its drawbacks. Undermining has caused subsidence cracks above ground, reliable water sources in the Bow Mountains have run dry, and carbon pollution threatens the environment everywhere. But proponents of coal mining will often tout the jobs and tax revenue created by the industry and how companies like Signal Peak are so critical in supporting rural communities like Muscle County. However, this is only part of the story. When coal mines shut down, the role that the industry plays in the local economy comes into stark focus. When those jobs disappear and the revenue dries up, rural towns and counties often have no economic base to fall back on. As the share of coal in our nation's energy portfolios has shrunk over the last couple of decades, communities from Appalachia to Montana have found themselves confronting this challenge. It is essential that our efforts to defend the environment are made with the economic health and longevity of our communities at the forefront. Today, I'd like to offer a warm welcome to Nicole Borner and Stacy Henderson, who will help us uncover how we can responsibly navigate a changing energy economy so that when coal is gone, our communities won't be. Nicole Borner, we like to call her Crash today. Nicole Borner served 2 years on the Roundup City Council and 6 years as Muscle County Commissioner. With deep roots in her community, she has been an active volunteer serving on numerous boards and local projects, as well as raising her daughter and building a small business in Muscle County. Nicole brings valuable insight from her years of experience working in government and business, particularly as it relates to rural economic development and the challenges faced by coal communities. Stacy Henderson, and Stacy just had a name change just recently, right?
Yeah, I've been married 4 weeks today.
Yeah. It's still going good.
Yeah, it's still going again.
Stacy Henderson joins us from West Virginia, and we're very happy to have her here, as well as Nicole, where she works with the Western Virginia Community Development Hub as the director of their community coaching program. A dedicated advocate for rural communities, she worked to empower local leaders to drive positive change in their communities. With years of experience working alongside leaders in West Virginia's coal communities, Stacy will help illustrate what positive rural development can look like. Well, thank you all so much for joining us. We have prepared some questions and discussion prompts for our panelists to speak to, and we encourage everyone in the audience to hold on to any questions they might have until the end. We've served excuse me, we've saved some time towards the end of the hour for audience members to ask their questions too. So without further ado, let's get started. Okay. Do you guys want to say any things prior? Any introductions? All right, let's get with it. Okay. Well, the first question for Nicole, and we'll have a follow up again with Stacy, is Nicole, coal mining has been an integral part of Muscle Shell's economy for years. Could you illustrate for us how mining has shaped the community and how reliant is the county on the jobs and revenue provided by Signal Peak?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Tom. Muscle County is a historic boom and bust coal town, with agricultural being the second largest business industry in the county. And Signal Peak opened back up again in 2009, and that was after decades of Muscle Shell County being one of the poorest counties in the state of Montana. I think it was like the third poorest besides the reservations in Muscle Shell. And Signal Peak pays about 1/3 of our property taxes. So it is a huge part of our tax base. Obviously, in the decades before, Muscle Shell County did not have the ability or the matching funds to create a diversified economy. So since 2009 and that coal mine opened back up, Muscle Shell County is what I would call a real company town. The entire community is very appreciative of the tax base that the coal mine is bringing to the community. The local leaders, they're pretty beholden to that coal mine as well. And anyway, I think, is that good enough to start out?
That sounds good.
Okay.
Stacy, you heard Nicole's description. Do you have similar stories or things that you can share with us?
Yeah, I mean, West Virginia has a very long history with coal mining. I come from a family of coal miners. My grandpa was a miner, several of my uncles. And what, just like, Nicole described, we've had boom and bust throughout the West Virginia's history with coal. And they're unpredictable, and they do have a huge impact on the community. So one of the things about West Virginia is we have several different types of coal as well. So, sometimes we'll have a bust in one part of the state. So, for example, the county I live in 2015, 2016, we had 18 operational coal mines. That would be a mix of underground and surface mining, also called strip mining. Um, Today we have one. However, in the northern part of the state that has more metallurgic coal, I can never say that word right, that's in higher demand, they've had an increase in mines. And so, one of the things we see is just a shift in population or families separating. So sometimes, depending on the county, because every county in West Virginia has a different set coal severance tax, as in addition to what goes to the state, depending on the county, they're going to see, kind of their revenue increase for a few years or be in absolute despair for a few years. So it's really unpredictable, and it does play a huge role in the economics of the county, and then the long term sustainability, which is difficult to predict as well, because I mean, it's really unpredictable when a mine's going to close, when they're going to idle, when they're going to lay off, and it has long-standing ramifications in the communities.
I think there's a psychological components to that too, when you are reliant on one industry and they bring in a revenue that makes a huge difference and brings in jobs. One thing I forgot to mention was Signal Peak employs about 1/3 of their employees work and live in Muscle Shell County. The rest live in basically Yellowstone County. But that psychological component, I think, is really huge. And that's how you kind of become a company town.
Well, you got both of you have just described the environment that create or that has set this. Can you help us understand how we got here? What policies that that the states and communities what policies that they adopted that made them so dependent on coal?
Well,
And
I
you can
know.
go Montana first and then West Virginia.
Well, I know in Montana, like even our state budget relies on the coal trust fund. So Montana in and of itself is kind of a coal state. A lot of our uh, grants that come down through the state are funded through the coal trust fund. I know communities like mine and Bighorn County, I think even Carbon County. So any coal county can access dollars through the coal board, you know, and so it funds a lot of things that help alleviate local taxpayers from having to pay for all the infrastructure. So
I think Montana might be a little bit better off than West Virginia. Again, because of our longstanding history with coal, the coal mines hold all the power. It, in Charleston, which is the capital city, our legislature will resume in early January. There will be so many coal lobbyists there, and the politicians that are funded by the Friends of Coal or coal action committees. One of the issues in West Virginia is so much of our tax base is it, particularly in the coal communities, comes from the coal severance tax. So that's basically the tax that the coal companies pay to extract the resources and for having their equipment in that county. So one of the issues that happens, I talked about my county having 18 operational mines and going to one. When that happened in our county, um, the coal mines moved any movable equipment to the county that has the lowest coal severance tax that they operate in. So they pay the least. So that has a trickle down effect that was felt immediately in our county because of the lack of economic diversification at that time and the reliance on the coal severance tax. So um, I live in a medium-sized county in West Virginia. We're about 26,000 people. So not too small, not too big. Our courthouse had to go to 4 days a week. We had to lay off all but 6 sheriff deputies for a pretty sizable county when the coal severance tax, when all these mines closed, because there was not enough coal severance tax to keep the courthouse open. That funds a large part of our education system. There were numerous teacher cuts. We ended up consolidating several smaller elementary schools. There was talk of consolidation of high schools because the lack of the resources from the coal severance tax. The county has rebounded a little bit, and there have been some other industries that have come in, but it's like this in every county. And the unfortunate thing Nicole talked about, the economics of Muscle Shoals County. West Virginia has extracted more coal than any state in the nation, and county by county, we still have some of the most poor counties in the nation. I am currently working with McDowell County, West Virginia, which at one time probably provided more coal than the the rest of West Virginia combined. McDowell County had so many coal mines. It had a town that had a millionaire's row because they were so affluent at that time. Now the school system there is closing additional schools. Their population has gone from 65,000 down to 15,000. And it's just all the trickle down effects of the coal industry and how impactful that is in such a negative way in our communities. I will say one of the things that West Virginia also has had a shale oil and gas boom in part of our state. One of the things that West Virginia didn't do long term was hold coal companies accountable for taking our resources and not providing back to our communities. So when the oil and gas boom happened around 2010 or so, the community foundations all got together and said, we're going to hold the oil and gas companies accountable. If you're going to take our resources, if you're going to contaminate our water, if you're going to destroy our roads, you're going to give back to our communities. So they basically forced them to set up endowments with the community foundations where they have to give so much of their revenue every year. You can see the implications of that quite tangibly today. I went to my stepson's football game 3 weeks ago at a community school that is in an oil and gas county, the facilities there would rival any college that you would see. And it's because they held the oil and gas companies accountable. Meanwhile, my kids' school, they're in trailers because we don't have the revenue for a school. So it's, there have been lessons learned, and I hope that communities and states continue to learn from West Virginia's mistakes over time.
Stacey, I have a question to kind of it takes us a little bit back, but could you share some about your mission, the approach in West Virginia Community Development Hub, and some of the circumstances that prompted the creation of an organization like this?
Yeah, so I work for the West Virginia Hub. We're a statewide nonprofit that's not affiliated with the state, so we don't get state funding. We were started in 2009 by just a small group of people that were passionate about building the leadership and capacity of everyday West Virginians to help them be ambassadors and advocates for change in their own community. So since the hub's inception, we've grown a lot. I've been at the hub for over 5 years. We primarily work in communities on the ground with community teams. So I'm a community coach. So what that means is I go to communities once a month. It's very grassroots, and I'm working with volunteer community teams on the grounds. They identify the issues or problems or opportunities in their community. We develop plans for those and then work to implement them through some technical assistance dollars. The hub also, we have a couple different, our coaching work is kind of our bread and butter, but we have a couple different things that we're also working on that I think you guys will find relevant. So we have our systems work, which is basically breaking down barriers that keep people in poverty. So part of that work includes the USDA Rural Partners Network, which I needed to check and see. I'll look and see if Montana has any RPN networks. We also do policy and advocacy work. So we have a federal white paper that talks about the barriers to federal funding for small rural communities. There's a lot of great research in there that is applicable to any state, not just West Virginia. And then we strive to amplify the positive stories and the positive narrative in West Virginia, because too often our story is told by people who don't have our best interest at heart and who are sharing a story that fits the narrative they want about West Virginia. And that's not the West Virginia I know and love. So the hub every day seeks to tell the story of West Virginians that are doing the work for West Virginia. I always like to share too. I came to the hub after serving as a volunteer on a community team that worked in my community. I believe in the work that we're doing, and I see the impact that we're making. I get to live it every day in my own community, and now work with other communities to help them achieve the same.
Thanks, Stacey. So Stacey's described some of the things that they put forward as some of what the mission is for the hub. I wanted to ask Nicole again as kind of a follow up here too. And Muscle Shell, you've been in and around Muscle Shell forever, so you know kind of the lay of the land. So can you describe what you see as some of the barriers to working on economic diversity in Muscle Shell? Can you describe some of the political challenges in acknowledging a post-coal future in a place like Muscle Shell? And you can spread those questions out, or take one or two or none, or no, you can't take none.
I'll
You
pop
take
it.
the first one.
What's the first one again?
In Muscle Shell County, what has been some of the barriers to working on economic diversity?
Oh, I would say some of the barriers to working on economic diversity has been education about what economic development is, willpower to do it, and then I spoke a little bit about too the psychology of being a community town and the psychology of being a poverty level town. So it's really difficult for people that have and elected leaders that have been in that position for a long time that are in a community of poverty, because it's really difficult to figure out how are you going to find those dollars to help diversify your economy. And you have to, and then not knowing where to go. So Stacy spoke a little bit about her organization that puts together information to help the elected leaders and volunteers figure out where are those dollars at that you can bring into your community, that you can leverage with your own local dollars to create that economic diversification. Sometimes that happens at a really small, simple level. Sometimes that's about, I call it, when I was in elected official position, I called it the housekeeping part of it. Because in order to attract people to come in and build businesses and come in and build and grow their families there, you have to create a place of livability. You also have to understand what that means in today's economy, because livability was different in the 60s and the 70s and the 80s and the 90s. People and families were looking for something different than what Roundup had to offer. So I'll boil it down to like a pretty simple thing that happened in Roundup. We had a great organization, the Arts and Culture Committee, got together and got a grant and put in a river walk. It was this wonderful river walk that we had down at our fairgrounds. And we truly do have one of the most beautiful fairgrounds in the state of Montana. It's along the Musselshell River. It has these wonderful walking trails that go up to the R that were, these trails were built in the 1930s by the CCC. And we had these great grandstands. It's just a great place to be. And this group put this grant together and had this wonderful river walk going down there. And I use that a lot with my friends. It was in our dogs, and we were running and walking down there and recreating, but it wasn't being maintained very well. So I, in my little volunteer mode, would tromp to the city council or to the commissioners and say, why are we letting this asset just languish? Who's taking care of it? I will form a Friends of the Riverwalk group and we'll raise some money. We'll host a little event down here and we will help maintain this. What can we do? And I was constantly told, we don't have the money to do it. We can't do it. We couldn't do it. And then you fast forward and then they close it down saying we can't hike up to the R anymore, which the community had used for over 70 years. So obviously then I got really upset. I'm like, and I'm calling other communities. I'm like, what are you guys doing for for your trails? And they would be like, trails are part of the economic development plan for our community to get people to come in, because that's what people are looking for today. They don't socialize the same way that we did in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. They like to walk. And a lot of these younger families aren't having children. They have fur babies, and this is what they want to do. So in Roundup, I have found that there is a huge educational component as to what is economic development. How do you advocate for your community, especially when you're an elected leader? That is one of your jobs as a county commissioner, is economic development and diversification. There are so many people at the state and federal level that have money that want to help you. And so it's your job to shake hands and say, this is what we're doing in our community. This is the direction we want to go. Will this program work? And sometimes it doesn't, but they will direct you to the place that you can help to get that project done. And then you can do the hard work and figure out, how are we going to leverage the grant dollars, our budget, our county budget, our city budget, to make these things happen, to create that livability, to get people and entrepreneurs to want to come in. I mean, my mom used to tell me when I was a kid, keep your house as though Jesus was coming to tea. I really feel that that's how you should think about your community, because people aren't going to want to come into your community and build a business if they see that you are not taking care of your community yourself, right? So it really starts with that basic housekeeping, especially when you've been depressed for such a long time. I think I felt like I talked too long, so I don't know if I need to answer the other two questions, but
Well, we might get back to
okay.
that. But you've set Stacy up well.
Okay.
So you've talked about the challenges. Stacy, could you tell us a little bit about what have been the drivers for your economic revitalization, and maybe some of the key stakeholders that you've worked with?
Yeah. And I'll just say, to Nicole's point, when people's basic needs aren't met, it's really hard for them to envision a future that's different than the past or the current reality. And so I think, it's a yes and conversation a lot of times. Like, yes, this isn't working, and we can, figure out what to do to change it. Um, so my organization has worked with over 65 communities, and we have started building economic diversification plans with these communities. Um, to really help them identify what the opportunities are for their economy. I think we're going to touch on this later, but I'll just say we cannot go into communities and say, hey, coal's not viable anymore. We're going to help you figure out what you can do now. That just wouldn't work in West Virginia. So, we take a more nuanced approach, and we often start with some asset mapping and helping the communities figure out what their underutilized assets are and what the opportunities are. And I'll be honest, when I was doing this work in my own community, my community is named Richwood. So we are a coal town and a lumber town. We're formed as a lumber town. Um, Coal mining has been popular as well. We have had every boom and bust that you can have. Actually, the invention of the electric dryer was kind of the nail in the coffin for my community, because no one needed wooden clothespins anymore, and that was so then our wooden clothespin factory closed at the same time as a big coal bust. And so that was in the late 70s. I was born in 79. I literally watched every store on my main street close in my youth. And there was people just did not know what a future was without coal or timber or the extraction industries that kind of felt familiar to them. And for many, that's synonymous with West Virginia and what built our state. So when we were doing this work, and the idea of being kind of a destination town came about, that was kind of laughable, even though we're a gateway to a 1,000,000-acre national forest that I spent hours and hours in growing up. I kind of took that for granted. So anyway, that was one of the things, as we worked through this process in my community, and someone said, hey, you guys can be a destination, and that can kind of be your transition. At this time, we didn't have any operational coal mines, and timber was down. I don't know that people believed it at first. They believe it now. We, went from not having any of the businesses that would support that to now having almost 50 since 2017. But there's numerous other projects we've seen that are kind of hospitality or tourism related, but also, like Nicole said, there are things that, you have to build the small wins, so river walks, we've seen things like that. We've seen communities who are looking at hydrogen or, uh, hydraulic um, opportunities. And it's really just helping the communities navigate what that looks like, what their transition could be, and then kind of developing a plan for what that looks like. So I'll say, when we work with our communities, we talk about getting some small wins and celebrating the small wins. I can't go into a community and say, hey, we're going to build an economic diversification plan. It's going to take us 7 years to see any of the real work from this, but I need you to stay the course for the entire 7 years. Wouldn't really work out. So we build in a lot of small wins. And so that might be a pocket park that has permeable surfaces and solar panels. It might be a farmer's market, because then we're helping grow, another economy and jobs for a different industry. Or not, people are buying food that's more local. There's a lot of small things that we can do that we always tell our communities we need to think about 100-day wins and then 6-month wins, because you got to kind of continue to build that in to keep people engaged and involved. Once you have a few wins and you talk about those, then everyone kind of wants to be part of a winning team, and things just start happening.
Stacey, it sounds like patience is a virtue.
It is, and I'm not a very patient person.
Well, we've talked a little bit about the transition and kind of how the communities can make that happen. But there's right now currently a lot of federal money that's out there. Can you either both of you, Nikki, Stacy, talk to some federal sources that are made available for energy for transition and energy communities? And can you share what some of those resources are?
So, we have seen a lot of our communities receive federal funding over the last several years. Over the last 4 years, there have been a lot more opportunities for federal funding than there was with the previous administration. So we have cautioned our communities that we need to be thoughtful about the opportunities that we're pursuing and looking at the resources that are going to be available as we transition to a different administration. But I'll say over the last 4 years, we have seen communities utilize congressionally directed spending. Um, we've had numerous communities receive millions of dollars for diversification with that. A couple coal specific projects that have received earmarks, is what we call the congressionally directed spending. Um, it's actually in one of my communities. It's a strip mine that is still active, but as it closes in sections, it's being reclaimed. Um, Invasive species are being removed, native vegetation is being added, and they're building a trail network that is going to become a preserve, a 500-acre preserve. They receive federal funding for that. USDA has had numerous federal funding, and then the EPA and the EDA. So my organization has been involved in, we were one of the recipients of the Build Back Better Challenge, which was from the EDA for a $10 million project. We were serving 21 coal impacted counties in West Virginia to help them with the economic diversification. Through the EPA, we've also had communities get community challenge grants that are focused on coal impacted communities that have either coal industry or coal fired power plant. And then finally, one that can be available to all of you guys. We are part of the Green Bank for Rural America initiative, which is our partner, Appalachian Community Capital, received $500 million to build out the Green Bank for Rural America, and it is open to communities in West Virginia, Central Appalachia, but also rural communities around the country, and communities that have tribal land. So I think a lot of Montana would qualify for that. The Green Bank for Rural America is really to help communities look at green and renewable energy sources. It's going to have a lot of funding that's available and technical assistance for communities to look at how you like the feasibility of building out a microgrid or a more sustainable wastewater treatment program. So we do have a webinar available in December. If you're interested in that, catch me afterwards and I'll give you my card to make sure that you get signed up for that webinar. But it's going to be a 4-year program that has a lot of resources available.
Stacy mentioned the Build It Back Better. There is a lot, and it depends, obviously, the amount of federal funding that comes down as to what administration is in power at that time. This last administration put in a lot of money to rural communities. So there's the USDA rural development dollars that are out there. I'm pretty sure that Montana State University is doing a program. They're doing like a study right now to find out which communities would be available to manufacture parts for quantum computers. And it is a component of that is it has to be in a rural community. But this goes back to what I was talking a little bit about leadership. You have to have people in leadership that are willing to go out and advocate and look for those dollars. And I understand how difficult and intimidating that can be when you're in a rural community, but that is your job when you're a leader, is to figure out what you have to communicate with your economic development organizations. You have to communicate with the associations that you're a part of, whether it's the League of Cities or the Montana Association of Counties, and you need to find out where those dollars are at to bring them back. So Muscle County, in my opinion, is missing the boat on these federal dollars that are coming down. There is so much money out there for public facilities. And when you take the fact that Muscle County has been a boom and bust coal town for its entire existence, and many of our public buildings are dilapidated, they're old. the county is growing and we don't even have the space to house the public buildings that we need for the public, for the services that we're providing. Um, s- M- Muscle Shoals County Courthouse is still heated by coal. There is dollars out there that would not cost our local taxpayer money to upgrade that facility. And that is not being pursued at this point in time. So it goes back to leadership. It goes back to education to be able to access these federal dollars. And it will depend on what administration is in office to access to what funding is going down there, but coming down to the local level. But it's also really important that local communities empower themselves as well. You don't always want to say, oh, we have to wait for this federal grant to come down. You want to find ways to be able to invest in yourselves and grow your own community. I think that's one of the reasons why I've always been really frustrated a little bit about Signal Peak and the way that that structure has been set up for Muscle Shell County, because we are missing out on tax dollars that could actually help the community help itself diversify its economy.
Nicole, can you again speak a little bit more about the tax dollars that Muscle Shell's missing out on and how they could potentially help with the future?
Yeah, so when Signal Peak opened back up in 2009, uh, the Signal Peak obviously came to the commissioners for the property tax abatement. So I'm sure most people know abatements are pretty much given at a local level. Large companies come in, they want these tax abatements so they can, operate. And, with this, we're going to provide X amount of jobs and we're going to provide X amount. So it's supposed to be a benefit, though. There is a lot of uh, conversation about how tax abatements are actually really hurtful to local economies. But Muscle Shell County at that time in 2009 gave the property tax abatement, but the coal company also asked for the coal gross proceeds tax abatement. Muscle Shell County at that time had a bunch of citizens come together, stakeholders like the hospital, the schools, the city, business owners. Do we want to give this other tax abatement to the coal company? The community came back and said, no, we do not want to give away. We want our full coal gross proceeds. We do not want to give that away. In the dark of the night, at the legislative session, the legislature gave Signal Peak a 50% coal gross proceeds tax. And so that meant Muscle Shell County was only getting half of their coal gross proceeds. Now the state kept its full amount, but Muscle Shell County had to take a 50% tax abatement after being 30 years of a depressed and poverty economy. So and that was for 10 years. In 2019, I was a county commissioner. I advocated that Signal Peak had its opportunity to have its tax abatement to get its company up and running and operating, and they should have to pay the full coal gross tax the full coal gross taxes to Muscle Shell County. I lost that battle. And so one more time, Muscle Shell County is being damaged or being hurt by Signal Peak being given well, not only another extension, but just another gift, because we know that Signal Peak is also not following environmental rules. So I live in a county where we aren't getting our full coal gross proceeds to help us diversify our economy, to help us pay off our school bond, to help us build roads, to help us upgrade our infrastructure that have been deteriorating for over 30 years. And they're not following the law and making sure that they're not damaging the environment. Signal Peak has a foundation that awards $300,000 a year. Their coal gross proceeds that they are getting, not having to pay, is over $1 million a year. Muscle Shell County could do so much with those dollars. We could set up, an endowment fund where we could pay for housing. We could pay for workforce training. There's so many things that we could do, but we don't get to do that because Signal Peak seems to keep getting all of these,
If I'm saying this correctly, you can correct me, Nicole, that I think Muscle Shell County since 2009 has probably lost some 30 to 40 million dollars.
Yeah, it's about $29 million in taxes that Muscle Shell County has lost.
This doesn't sound fair right now, but
I'll just say in West Virginia, our governor, well, he's actually just was elected to the United States Senate. He's notoriously doesn't pay his tax, his coal severance tax, his property tax, and that it's just a system of a lack of accountability throughout West Virginia. The coal companies hold so much of the power, and every now and then a squeaky wheel makes a little bit of change by people going to the public meetings and complaining enough that then someone pays a bill or two. But I don't have a number like Nicole does, but I would imagine it's a significant amount in the coal severance tax, and the property tax that coal industries are continually given breaks and credits and adjustments that they probably don't deserve.
Yeah, and
They definitely
when
don't.
you aren't receiving your full taxes, then the community is reliant on federal dollars, right? Then you don't have the ability to grow your own economy, to diversify your own economy, because these companies are not paying what they should have to pay because legislators think it's okay to give them a break. It frustrates me that we only give breaks to great big businesses and we don't give breaks to small businesses. I know what it's like to run a small business. It's you don't get a break like that. You pay your taxes. I know what it's like to be a property tax. I don't get a break. I have to pay.
Um, this is a little out of left field here, but what makes you optimistic about the future?
What makes it
Hold it down.
okay? Huh. I showed you the TikTok that showed you my mood this morning. Would you guys like me to say it? I can sing it.
No.
Yeah, okay.
I think we have mostly adults in the crowd, but
Okay.
it still might offend some.
Okay. I will not sing my mood. What makes me optimistic, I think, is people that continue to do the work to take care of their communities, to take care of the earth and the environment. It makes me optimistic to see young people that are a part of Northern Plains Resource Council that are fighting every day. Continue to work in economic development. I do it specific through the cooperative business model, which I am a huge fan of because that is a democratic business ownership. And I believe in people power and people coming together and people solidarity. Even if we live in a world where there's a lot of people where wrong things are happening around us all the time, it takes people coming together and constantly fighting for what is right. Um, and I'm going to sing my song inside my head when I look at you and I know how you voted.
Yeah. Wait, yeah. If you're really interested, see her in the back for this. Stacey, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I'll just say, anecdotally, what makes me optimistic is so one of my best friends, her husband's a coal miner. She has a 15-year-old son. He's not going to be encouraged to go into the coal mines because even though that's what puts food on his table, his parents know it's not a viable long-term career for him. So just that shift in mindset with a lot of people in West Virginia, I feel like that has happened in the last 10 or 15 years. Um, when I see so I live in a coal community. When I see exciting projects that are happening on reclaimed coal land, that gets me excited. One of the projects that's happening in my county is a solar farm. It's being put on a reclaimed strip mine. It's about a 400-acre reclaimed strip mine. They're hiring a project manager if anyone wants to move to Nicholas County. It's through the National Association of Counties. But projects like that make me excited. In Boone County, West Virginia, which is one of the most poverty-stricken rural communities or counties in our state, on reclaimed coal mine there, they have one of the largest lavender farms in the country. They just started processing the lavender last year. So kids are learning at different career outcomes and opportunities. It's okay to tell kids not to go into the coal industry anymore. When I was a kid, when I was going to you were either going into coal or you were going to college. And so, as we continue to just see little shifts and different, mindsets, that gives me hope and optimism. And I think uh, I have two kids that are 21 and 18. They're way smarter than I was at their age. And just seeing how involved kids are, the keynote speaker at lunch, hearing her talk and knowing like how informed youth are today gives me hope that they're going to erase some of the transgressions of the past and, make some strides toward the future.
Yeah, we have to hope. We have to have hope. Say, you guys have have been there, done that kind of thing. We're just kind of starting our mission here. What's your best advice for us as we get underway?
Yeah, so buckle up. It's going to be a long ride, probably bumpier than Nicole's morning was. But just encouraging people to stay the course. One of the things we say at the hub is speak the unspeakable. Don't be afraid to say what people don't want to hear, even if it's not going to be popular. Learn from the mistakes of West Virginia. Hold the coal companies accountable. And that's probably not very politically correct. I'm going to say it anyway. Tell them you don't give a shit that they're giving $300,000 when they're leaving millions of dollars on the table. Coal companies have to quit giving you crumbs and getting credit for it as if and having it be front page headlines. Who cares when they're robbing the kids of good schools? They're destroying our roads, our drinking water. There are places in West Virginia you cannot drink the water. You can't drive on the roads. I don't care that they're giving a little bit of money through their foundation. Hold them accountable fully. And then in terms of the economic diversification, take advantage of every resource you can. Be the squeaky wheel. Look for the opportunities. Federal funding is probably going to get harder over the next few years. Take this time to hunker down and make your plans because it will change. Everything shifts. The pendulum will go back in the other direction. Be ready when that happens. We have a plan, stick to it, be willing to tell your story, and don't back down.
Just by the applause in the crowd, I feel much better too. So thank you. How are we doing on time? What? Okay, we're going to open up that 10 minutes for questions. Okay. Yes, we have one in the audience. Do we have a microphone for folks in the audience? Okay, bingo.
No one tell my boss I cussed, please.
My name is Tom Tao, and I do know a little bit about the severance tax. I think I wrote most of it myself. And one of the things that I want you to know about is that I was not unaware of the peaks and valleys of the great big bundle of money that comes in at the beginning, and at the end, we have a lot of problems. So I insisted that we include tail end impacts as well as front end impacts on our impact monies. So I don't want you to forget about those. The coal board administers that, and believe it or not, even with our Republican legislature, they have continued to put in the same amount of money now during the closing as they did at the beginning. Make use of that money. It's there. It's there for you.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you very much. Thanks for that reminder. Folks, we have more questions, please. Here we go. We have another brave one. Hi, Phil.
Yeah, I'm Phil Richmond. I got a question for Stacy. Is there ag in West Virginia?
Yeah, we do have an agriculture industry. I don't think it's probably as strong or as big as it is in Montana. We've seen a shift in the last few years toward agritourism and more sustainable agriculture. So we've had a lot of programs that have tried to retrain coal miners into different industries. A couple have stuck, a couple haven't, but a couple big ones that are gaining some traction have been kind of sustainable farming, forest farming with pigs and cows. We've seen a lot in the maple syrup industry because there's a lot of value added products there. And then as of late, we've seen a lot of high tunnels and hydroponics in the agriculture industry in West Virginia. Unfortunately, you know, coal mining takes up a lot of land and a lot of resources. I think that has prevented in some of our counties the growth in agriculture. And West Virginia has some soil issues. We have some highly acidic soil in large parts of the state that make it difficult in terms of growing things in the ground.
Yes.
Hello, my name is John Smiley. I think this question for Stacy. I'm wondering if your organization, one of the problems that we obviously have in Montana, I know you have in West Virginia, is around opioid addiction and other kinds of addiction. And I've seen that there is some, I think, work on this that we're trying to replicate here about recovery community organizations. Do you work with any of those with your organization?
Yeah, we do. And so my organization has we have a lot of different areas that we work on through our fellowships, which we do to try to increase people's capacity and leadership. We've seen a lot of people from the recovery community involved in that. I'll say we work with volunteer community teams in much of our work that's programmatic. And so we always say we work with whoever shows up, and whoever shows up has a voice and a vote. And we don't believe in power dynamics. So the mayor and the recovering addict have the same voice and the same vote in our community meetings. So, and I'll share a story from real quick. One of the guys, his name's James Burt. He's on one of my community teams. If James walked in this room, a lot of people would underestimate him. He's a veteran who has dealt with some addiction struggles. He has some face tattoos and just a little bit of a rough around the edges look. But we believe that everyone is an expert in their community. So when James started showing up at community meetings, we empowered him and gave him a voice. As a veteran, James is really wants to help solve homelessness, particularly for veterans. And housing is a big issue in West Virginia, much like across the country. And James has worked, he received a power planning grant from the Appalachian Regional Commission for his homeless to be able to move forward his research and work on homelessness. And he is putting together a plan to submit for funding to implement his project. So we've seen a lot of success in working with people in the recovery industry. West Virginia has, the other toll that coal has is on the people. People who have black lung or got addicted to opioids, because coal mining is difficult work. And so, we also have the opioid settlement money that unfortunately is not going to be utilized in ways to, as much as we would like to see the economic diversification in our communities. We're still working to hold our elected officials accountable for that. But I guess that was a long answer to your question. But yes, we do work with the recovery community. We found that they're passionate people who, when they get involved, are really dedicated to seeing things through.
That's a great question. Oh, we have another one.
So
Mr.
I think
Charles.
in Montana, sometimes economic diversity is seen as a threat to coal development. And I just wondering if there's any ideas on how to deal with that.
How to deal with a threat that communities see as economic diversification.
Yeah, cool community.
I I don't know if I have an answer to that, Steve. 'Cause I think you're right. I think a lot of people hunker down into their side of the fence, and they are just going to be reliant on the coal. I think with this Build It Back Better, there was an opportunity for communities to put in EV charging stations, and obviously Roundup in Muscle Shell County didn't do that, and I attributed it to the fact that they do not want to diversify from coal because they are a coal community. That is their identity. And it's unfortunate because we're two major highways, 12 and 87. Lewistown is growing, Billings is growing. Why would you not position your community for the future? I don't know. Muscle Shell County made that choice also over 30, 40 years ago when they didn't want um, natural gas lines moving through their community, right? We're a coal town. We don't want natural gas coming to our community. You see the ramifications of um, non-visionary thinking. And I am concerned about my community doing that again because the money that we've got now that is allowing us to do more than we did 20 years ago is like candy, and they just can't hold the coal mine accountable.
Stacey, I think you had.
Yeah. So I cannot walk into a community in West Virginia and say, all right, we're here to talk about how you're not going to need coal anymore. That it just wouldn't, it wouldn't fly. And so I think it's a balance. I'm deeply respectful of the coal industry. It has, as I said, I come from a family of coal miners. I understand the impact coal has had on the state. And, we have proud coal heritage, and I am proud that West Virginia has, you know, built a lot of the country with our coal. However, I think it's okay to say coal's not going to be a viable option forever. And so it is a really nuanced conversation. I think we tiptoe around it a lot in terms of we talk about other opportunities that people can pursue. And sometimes we say, this can be parallel to coal. This doesn't have to necessarily be, your only economy, but, everyone in West Virginia knows that the booms and the busts that we've had in coal. And so it is easy to say, like, when this can just help you be more prepared for when those busts come, and this can lessen the impact. But it's not it's not just something that's an easy conversation to have. And we have to point to the success stories of the communities that are making that change and that transition. And again, it's hard to get people um to envision something that's different than what they know. Change is hard for a lot of people. And so when we talk about opportunities that are different than what they know, that can be scary for a lot of folks. And so I think it's just, if you've raised teenagers, I feel like it's approaching the conversation with coal is a lot like approaching any conversation with teenagers. And you just have to be really delicate in how you approach it and what you say.
Yeah.
If you can get them to think it's their idea, then great.
As a former teacher, I understand. I'm going to ask this last question because if I don't, I might get in trouble later. Nicole, if the Signal Peak coal mine continues to operate as it does, unbridled, what do you see as the economic impacts for Muscle Shell?
Well, I think clean water and a clean um, environment is a foundation to economic diversification and viability. If we don't have clean water, why would somebody move to our community? Just why? Why would a business want to set up shop in a community that doesn't have clean water? It's pretty basic to me. And I think that's part of my frustration about my community that I really do love and adore. It's my home. It's my home. And it frustrates me that we have to have this kind of a struggle.
Hey, any other questions, folks? Hey, All right, time. All right, time's up. All right, perfect. Well, I want to thank everybody for being a wonderful crowd, and I'd love to thank our presenters for doing a wonderful job today. Can we give them a big round of applause?